Good morning, Mark Seth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video blog for Monday, June 25th, 2012. Please forgive the raspiness of my voice today. I have one of those summertime colds. Fun. You know, Debby has been fighting something, not a summertime cold, but colder sea surface temperatures, not much heat content, and shear and some dry air. I'm going to explain that on today's video blog for you. First of all, let's take a look at the forecast track. This is the 11 o'clock advisory. Winds are down to 45 miles per hour. The pressure is coming up, and you can see that it's going to be, apparently, if we can trust this finally, turning almost due east here, heading out into the Atlantic Ocean. You remember, I'm sure you do, that it was forecast to come up and maybe head towards Texas, and then it looked like it might come into southeast Louisiana, and then it was forecast to maybe come up here into Florida, the Panhandle, and now a hard right turn, a forecasting headache for sure for the folks at the National Hurricane Center. Luckily, it's not an intense hurricane. You usually don't have this kind of a forecast problem with an intense hurricane, because the factors that make the hurricane intense almost always make it a little easier to forecast for its path. And I'm talking about a Category 3, 4, or 5. Now, this could have been a Category 1 or 2 hurricane meandering up here, and that would have been a big problem for this area. So don't get me wrong, even though it was not an intense hurricane, it still has provided lots of rainfall, some tornadoes, water spouts, the evacuation of parts of the St. George Island area here near Cape San Blas. So not a nice weekend at all. A lot of vacations were ruined down here. Heavy rains over Florida. And it was just from a strengthening tropical storm that itself was fairly disorganized. So it could have been worse, and luckily it was not an intense hurricane with this same forecasting headache. If we look at the satellite picture, this is a visible shot. All of the deep convection around the center is virtually gone. The sun is coming out here in parts of the Panhandle. The heavier shower and thunderstorm activity is over the water, parts of the peninsula here, and then out over the Atlantic Ocean as well. If we look at a shear map from the University of Wisconsin, the center of Debby located here, and if you remember from my previous video blogs, when the wind is blowing across the top of a system like this, it blows the convection all in one direction. And if we go back to that other satellite picture, that's exactly what is happening. The upper level winds are coming around from the anticyclone, which is down here, and that's blowing clockwise, but the wind is this way, so the displacement of the convection is very apparent. It's not able to align itself over that center and stay there. When these thunderstorms pop up, they get brushed off to the east like that, and so it's not able to strengthen. So that's where this shear map really helps us. Had it been sitting right here, the wind would be fanning out in a much more clockwise fashion, and it could be a lot stronger if it was down closer to the Yucatan Channel. But because Debby is on the north side of the upper level high down here, this is a big upper level high pressure area, it's experiencing some west to west southwesterly shear, and that helps to weaken it. The other thing that's helping to weaken it, Debby is located right in here where it's very low ocean heat content. In fact, there's almost no solid heat content in this part of the Gulf of Mexico. This is where your high ocean heat content is, here, and especially down in the Caribbean Sea. And what that means is that the water is warm, and it's also warm very deep. It goes, that 80-degree line or higher extends much farther down into the Gulf of Mexico here than it does here. This is what we call shallow shelf water, all through here. So even though you could go down to the beach, and the water temperatures might be 82, 83 degrees, it's real easy to stir and mix this up with something like a tropical storm, and you lose and dissipate a lot of that heat content that's in here, and that too helps to sap it. Looking at the wider shot of the heat content map, it'll be interesting to see when it moves across. The Gulf Stream is on this side of Florida and the Carolinas, and there is a lot of heat content in there. In fact, that water is moving. That's why they call it the Gulf Stream. It moves at a few knots, comes around out of the Caribbean and the Gulf, and snakes its way across the North Atlantic. Once Debby reaches the east side of Florida, we'll have to see what happens. At that point, it could just escape out to the northeast, or it could come out, get trapped by high pressure, maybe move back. We are going to have to watch this closely after it crosses Florida, because Debby has a large envelope of energy to work with if conditions will allow it to develop. There's the circulation, not much rainfall associated with it out over the center. Still some heavier showers and embedded thunderstorms over the panhandle, certainly parts of the peninsula, and then here's that displaced convection over the Atlantic. Once the circulation crosses over the next few days here and emerges into these warmer Atlantic waters where there's more heat content, we'll have to see what happens. Hopefully it'll move northeast and away from land and go on out to sea. But we are going to stay on top of that very closely, because that's what we do. And you should be watching it closely as well. And keep in mind that tropical rainfall can be deadly if it creates flooding. Even a few inches of water, moving water especially, and certainly more so, can take your SUV away, your small car, absolutely, and it can really cause problems. So remember that tropical cyclones have 4 weapons: wind, storm surge, rain, and the possibility of downburst winds / tornadoes. This still has the heavy rainfall and the threat of tornadoes with it, so stay on top of what's going on from your local National Weather Service office and your local media outlets, because even though it's weakening, it's not gone. I'll have another update for you tomorrow. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, my website, hurricanetrack.com. Glad to contribute to Hurricane and Hurricane HD, and I will have another video blog for you tomorrow.